The night was alive with whispers. Obika pressed his back against the trunk of an ancient tree, heart pounding in his chest. The evil forest around him seemed to breathe. Leaves rustled, though there was no wind. Moments ago, he had seen a towering masquerade spirit gliding between the trees, its white mask glowing in the moonlight and its hollow eyes fixed on him. The sight had nearly stopped his heart. In the silence, he could hear a faint rattle, like dry leaves or bones clacking, somewhere to his left. The spirit was drawing closer. Now it was hunting him in the darkness, and Obika knew with dread that he might not live to see the morning. A few hours earlier, Obika had been safe at home in the village of Umuaka, unaware of the nightmare to come. It began at dusk when his little brother Nnamdi went missing. The boy had chased a grasshopper beyond their compound's fence toward the forbidden grove of Ajo Ofia, the evil forest. By the time the family realized Nnamdi was gone, the sun was slipping below the horizon. Obika's mother, Ugoye, ran to the edge of the village clearing, calling Nnamdi's name in a trembling voice. A few concerned neighbors gathered with lanterns and torches, drawn by her cries. They peered into the wall of looming trees where the light of evening failed. Fear settled over them all. Some of the women began to pray under their breath, and one of the men clutched a protective amulet tied around his neck. The final glow of twilight was fading. Night had fully fallen, and the towering trees of Ajo Ofia loomed as a wall of solid darkness beyond the clearing. Every child in Umuaka grew up hearing warnings about Ajo Ofia. No one dared enter that forest after dark, not even the bravest hunters. It was said vengeful spirits dwelt there, the restless ghosts of those cast out or left to die in its depths. "We can't just leave him in there," Ugoye sobbed, clutching Obika's arm. Her eyes were wild with panic. Old Ozoemina, the village elder, held up a hand. "Night has fallen," he said gravely. "We must be careful. We cannot shout his name loudly now. The spirits are listening." His face was etched with worry as he stared at the black line of trees. Everyone knew the taboos. Do not call out in the evil forest at night. Do not whistle. Do not tempt the unseen ones. Emeka, Obika's closest friend, grabbed Obika by the shoulder. In a hushed voice, he pleaded, "Don't even think about going in, Obika. Remember the saying, the grasshopper that strays into the ant's coop ends up in the spirit's world. If you go in there at night, who knows what will happen?" Obika's heart ached with fear for his brother. 6-year-old Nnamdi was out there somewhere in the darkness, surely terrified and alone. Obika swallowed hard. "Emeka, that grasshopper is my brother," he answered quietly. "I can't leave him." Ugoye's knees nearly buckled. She held onto Obika, tears streaming down her cheeks. "My son, please. The spirits." "I know, Mama," Obika said softly, "but Nnamdi needs me now, not in the morning. I'll bring him back." He tried to keep his voice steady, hiding the tremor in his chest. The group of villagers exchanged uneasy glances. None of them volunteered to accompany Obika. The dread of Ajo Ofia was too deep. Ozoemena stepped forward and pressed a small palm oil torch into Obika's hand. The old man also took a crude wooden charm from around his own neck, a pendant etched with protective symbols, and put it over Obika's head. "If you must go, take this," he said, "and go with respect. Speak softly. Disturb nothing. May your chi protect you." Ugoye hugged her son fiercely one last time. "Chineke God, protect my children," she prayed in a broken whisper. Obika felt her tears on his shoulder. He gently pulled away, determination written on his face. With a final nod to Emeka, Obika turned toward the tree line. The ancient silk cotton tree at the forest's edge stood like a silent guardian marking the boundary between worlds. Beyond it, only darkness and danger. Obika gripped the torch and stepped past the tree, entering the evil forest. Immediately, the air changed. It was cooler, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. It felt as though he had stepped through a curtain between worlds. Behind him, the comforting sounds of the village faded away, and ahead lay only an oppressive hush. The orange glow of the torch flickered on twisted tree trunks and tangled vines. Obika could barely see a few steps ahead. He whispered a plea under his breath. "Papa, wherever you are, guide me." Fingering the old cowrie shell charm from his late father that hung around his neck, he gathered courage and pressed on. Inside the forest, an uncanny silence hung between the chorus of nighttime insects. Obika moved carefully, mindful of every rustle his feet made in the leaf litter. Now and then, an owl hooted somewhere to his left. A moment later, the great bird itself swept overhead, its pale wings nearly brushing the top of Obika's head. He ducked instinctively. The owl vanished into the treetops without a sound, but Obika's heart was now thudding against his ribs. In Igbo land, the cry of an owl at night was a bad omen, an emissary of the spirits. He forced himself to breathe slowly. "Nnamdi," he called softly, not much louder than a breath. "Nnamdi, it's Obika, where are you?" He dared not shout. His voice sounded small and swallowed by the enormity of the trees. There was no reply, only the endless drone of crickets. As he pushed deeper, he noticed shapes on the ground in the torchlight. Here, a clay pot broken in pieces. There, a bundle of feathers and bones, signs of old sacrifices left to appease whatever lurked in this place. Obika's skin crawled. He stepped around an oddly shaped lump on the path, then realized with a shock that it was a human skull, half buried in the dirt and crawling with ants. He beat back a cry, choking it into a gasp. This was truly a realm of the dead. Suddenly, he stiffened. Beneath the drone of insects, he heard something else, a faint voice carried by the night breeze. "Obika," it whispered. Obika whirled around, holding up the torch. Beyond the flicker of light, there was only impenetrable darkness. The voice had sounded familiar, uncannily like his late father calling from deep among the trees. A swell of longing and terror rose inside him. Could it truly be his father's spirit trying to guide him? Or was some trickster in the dark mimicking that beloved voice to lure him away? His mouth went dry. Never answer your name at night. The elders warned that if a spirit calls, you must not reply, or it could steal your soul. He pressed a fist against his lips to keep silent. The disembodied voice came again, a little louder, stretching the two syllables of his name. "Obika!" Obika's hands trembled. He nearly took a step toward the sound, but stopped himself. If he followed it, he might wander off the path forever. Summoning his will, Obika shut his eyes and ignored the voice. He focused on why he was here. Nnamdi. Gritting his teeth, he resumed moving forward. One cautious step, then another. After a few moments, the calling faded, dissolving into the whisper of leaves. Whoever or whatever had tried to deceive him melted back into the gloom, denied its prize. Obika let out a shuddering breath and continued on. Swallowing his fear, Obika crept further in the direction he hoped Nnamdi might have wandered. He followed a faint trail of trampled underbrush, perhaps left by the boy's small feet. A few steps later, his torchlight caught a scrap of fabric dangling on a thorn bush, a piece of Nnamdi's blue shorts. Obika's heart leapt. His brother had definitely come this way, and recently. "Please, let this be the right way," he begged silently. After what felt like an eternity of inching forward, he heard it, a faint whimper like a child crying. Obika froze, straining his ears. The sound came again, slightly louder off to his left behind a clump of dense bushes. Heart thudding with hope, Obika carefully pushed through the shrubs. "Nnamdi," he whispered. Suddenly, a small trembling figure darted out from behind the tree and almost collided with him. Obika jerked the torch up in alarm. In its light, he saw the wide, tear-streaked eyes of his brother. "Obika!" Nnamdi sobbed in relief, throwing thin arms around his waist. The boy was shaking like a leaf. Obika dropped the machete he'd been carrying and wrapped Nnamdi in a tight embrace. "Shh, I'm here," he whispered, nearly crying himself. He knelt down to look over his brother. Aside from a few scratches on Nnamdi's arms and legs, he seemed unharmed, just terrified out of his wits. "I'm sorry. I went too far," Nnamdi hiccuped. "I got lost. Then I heard voices. Laughter, but not like people." The boy shuddered violently. Then I saw them." He couldn't bring himself to say more. Obika understood at once. Nnamdi had seen the roaming spirits of Ajo Ofia, and they had terrified him. "It's okay," Obika soothed, pressing a hand to the back of the boy's head. "I've got you now. We're going home." Nnamdi clung to Obika's neck as he lifted him up. The child was light and exhausted, his face buried against Obika's shoulder. Obika picked up his machete, then turned back the way he'd come. Relief flooded him. He had found Nnamdi. Now they just needed to get out. But escaping Ajo Ofia would not be so simple. As Obika retraced his steps, a hushed rustling echoed through the understory. It wasn't the noise of their own movements. Something else was nearby. Obika's pulse quickened. He tightened his grip on the torch, holding it aloft. The flickering light cast dancing shadows that played tricks on his eyes. A sound like distant drums began to throb in the darkness, a slow, rhythmic thump-thump that he could feel in his bones. It was impossible to tell where it came from. The sound seemed to vibrate in the air all around like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Obika's breath caught. There was no festival tonight. No living soul would drum here. The spirits, they were awake. Nnamdi whimpered softly. He had noticed it too. In Obika's ear he breathed. "They are coming!" A chill ran through Obika. He moved faster, half carrying, half dragging Nnamdi along the overgrown path. The edge of the forest had to be close now. He remembered the big silk cotton tree wasn't far. If they could just reach the clearing. Behind them, twigs snapped. In the corner of his eye, Obika glimpsed a shape flit between two trees. Just a blur, gone in an instant. He swallowed hard and kept going, whispering prayers under his breath. Then, abruptly, the drumming stopped. The sudden silence was worse than the sound. Obika's ears rang with tension. They rounded a twist in the path and Obika's heart leapt. Up ahead, he could make out a slight thinning of the darkness. That must be the forest's edge, the way out. He squeezed Nnamdi's hand. "Almost there," he whispered. But at that very moment, a tall figure slid out from behind a tree and blocked their path. Obika skidded to a halt, nearly dropping the torch. In front of them stood a masquerade spirit, an Imanu, unlike any Obika had seen in village festivals. It towered at least 10 feet tall. Its face was a grotesque mask of white wood with dark hollow eyes and long curved horns. Ropes of raffia hung from its arms and waist, and it moved with an unnatural gliding gait. There was no sound, no footstep as it appeared. 1 second, the path was clear, the next it was filled by the silent spectre. Nnamdi let out a terrified cry and hid behind Obika. Obika felt as though his blood turned to water. Every instinct told him to run, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew this must be one of the forest's vengeful spirits, perhaps an ancient ancestor or a condemned soul turned into a ghostly masquerade. Summoning courage, Obika sank to his knees and bowed his head low, pulling Nnamdi with him. His voice shook as he addressed the spirit in respectful Igbo. "Great spirits, please forgive us. We do not mean to trespass. My little brother wandered into your abode, and I came to take him home. We beg your mercy." The forest remained deathly quiet. For a long moment, the tall masquerade did not move or respond. Obika could feel its gaze, that emptiness behind the mask's eye slits, fixed upon them. Cold sweat dripped down his face. Behind and around them, faint whispering sounds started up, like many voices murmuring in the leaves. Obika dared a glance from the corner of his eye. His stomach dropped. More masked shapes were emerging in the gloom among the trees. On all sides they gathered, some tall and spindly, others short and hunched, their painted faces peering from the shadows. There must have been half a dozen or more slowly encircling them. A sudden chill swept through the grove. and the flame of Obika's torch guttered dangerously, almost going out. In the shuddering half-light, the spirit's mask looked even more menacing. Painted smiles stretched into hungry grins, hollow eyes flickering with each movement of the flame. Obika's heart hammered wildly. He kept his head down, squeezing Nnamdi's trembling hand. The boy was quietly sobbing, trying hard to be brave but failing. The lead spirit, the tall one blocking their exit, tilted its head at an unnatural angle. A dry, whispery laugh emanated from it, the sound scraping like a knife on stone. Then it began to drift closer, arms outstretched. In one hand, it held a long staff topped with a skull. Obika shut his eyes tight, bracing for the worst. He silently said goodbye to his mother, to his friend Emeka, to the life he thought he would have. At least he thought, Nnamdi will not die alone. The spirit staff clattered on the ground. It reached with a claw-like hand toward Obika's face. A bitter cold emanated from the spirit, prickling Obika's skin and turning his breath to mist. Icy dread washed over him. And then, a sound rang out that did not come from the forest. A clear, familiar sound cutting through the night from the direction of the village. Cock-a-doodle-doo! A rooster crowed, strong and sure. For an instant, everything in the forest seemed to freeze. The hand of the masquerade stopped inches from Obika's nose. The circle of spirits around them stirred in agitation. A strange hissing passed through the air. Cock-a-doodle-doo! The rooster crowed again, echoing over the trees. The first light of dawn must have been nearing. Some vigilant rooster felt it and announced the coming morning. To the people of Umuaka, the rooster's cry at dawn was ordinary. But to the spirits of Ajo Ofia, it was as powerful as a thunderbolt. It meant their time of roaming freely was ending. The tall masquerade recoiled. It let out a shrill, inhuman screech of anger. In response, the others hidden in the trees began wailing. A chorus of eerie cries that made Obika's blood curdle. Obika, run! A voice suddenly shouted from the direction of the clearing. It was Emeka. He must have been waiting and listening, and now he'd heard the rooster too. Run now! He yelled. Obika didn't need to be told twice. He lurched to his feet, yanking Nnamdi up with him. The circle of spirits had faltered, some drifting back, their forms flickering like shadows under a gust of wind. Mustering every ounce of strength, Obika bolted forward straight toward the gap where the tall spirit had been. The masquerade swiped at him with its long arm, but it was too slow, or perhaps weakened by the encroaching dawn. His fingers grazed Obika's shoulder, cold as death, but failed to hold him back. Obika burst through the ring of spirits, dragging Nnamdi by the wrist. They sprinted the last dozen yards through the trees. Low branches whipped at their faces, and thorns clawed at their legs, but they did not stop. Behind them, furious screeches and howls erupted as the spirit horde gave chase, but their voices already sounded distant and fading. All of a sudden, the trees opened up. Obika and Nnamdi stumbled out into the open field of the village clearing. Cool early dawn air hit Obika's lungs. They were out. A handful of villagers were gathered a short distance away, lanterns bobbing. On seeing the two brothers emerge, a cheer and cries of relief went up. Ugoye, who had been kneeling on the ground in prayer, sprang to her feet and ran toward them. Obika slowed to a stop, breathing hard. Nnamdi, sobbing anew, practically leapt into their mother's arms. Ugoye sank to the ground with him, holding him tight and thanking the gods over and over. As her arms went around Obika too, he felt his own composure crack at last. A sob escaped his throat and tears of relief filled his eyes. He was alive, they both were. Then she reached out and pulled Obika into the embrace as well, tears of joy streaming down her face. My sons, was all she could say. Moments earlier, when those awful screams had pierced the night, some of the villagers had cried out in fright. One woman fell to her knees praying while another man spat out tufia to ward off evil. Now, with Obika and Nnamdi back, the tension was palpable as they all waited for an explanation. One of the men, Okafor, swallowed hard and ventured in a hushed tone, Obika! What did you see in there? Obika drew in a slow breath. His voice trembled as he answered, I saw them! He didn't need to explain further. The people around him understood at once. A few gasped softly, hands flying to cover their mouths. Mama Ifeoma made the sign of the cross and whispered, "Chineke, Mary Ebere, God has shown mercy." Others nodded in agreement, their eyes never leaving the ominous tree line. Emeka and the others quickly surrounded them. Emeka's face was wet with tears as well. "You did it, Obika!" he gasped, gripping his friend's shoulder. "I can't believe! How did you?" Obika was trembling from head to toe. He turned back toward the forest line. Just inside the shadows of the trees, he could still make out movement. A pair of glowing eyes, a flash of a white mask. But the figures did not step out into the light. The spirits lingered at the very edge, watching with hatred as the villagers led Obika and Nnamdi further away. One last mournful howl echoed from deep within Ajo Ofia, and then all fell silent except for the chirping of morning birds. By the time the sun's ring peaked above the horizon, the evil forest was quiet as if nothing had happened. But Obika and Nnamdi would never forget what they had survived. That remaining night in Umuaka, not a single eye was fully closed in sleep. Terrified yet grateful, families huddled together in their huts, whispering prayers of thanks and hanging charms above their doorways. Small fires were kept alive till daybreak to push back the lingering shadows of Ajo Ofia. Later that morning, after the brothers had been checked and soothed, the elders of Umuako gathered by the silk cotton tree at the forest edge to perform a sacrifice of appeasement. The chief priest intoned prayers while they poured out libations of palm wine onto the earth. He placed fresh kola nuts and a live white cockerel bound by its feet at the foot of the ancient tree. These offerings were to beg forgiveness from the unseen beings of the forest, to calm any anger stirred by the night's intrusion. Obika, exhausted but alive, watched from a distance, wrapped in a blanket while Nnamdi slept in their mother's lap. Ozoemena, the elder, approached Obika quietly. The old man's hands trembled slightly as he placed them on Obika's shoulders. "You are a brave boy," he said, almost in a whisper. "Foolishly brave, but brave. The gods and our ancestors must have been with you in that forest." Obika touched the cowrie shell charm at his neck, the keepsake of his father. In his heart, he wondered if it was truly his father's guiding spirit, his chi, that had helped shield them from harm. He glanced towards the dark tree line, and his eyes filled with respect and fear. Now we truly know the stories about Ajo Ofia are real. The forest is alive with spirits, and they do not welcome the living. Obika nodded slowly. His gaze was fixed on the forest, which in the daylight looked just like any other cluster of trees, but he knew the truth of it now. He felt older, as if he had left a piece of his youth among those shadows. "I will never set foot there again," he said quietly. That was a promise to himself as much as a statement to Ozoemena. His mother placed an arm around him. "We will thank the gods every day for your return," Ugoye said softly. She then added a gentle reprimand, the fear still evident in her voice. "But if you ever do something like that again, Obika, shame oh! My heart cannot bear it." Obika managed a faint smile and rested his head against his shoulder. "I won't, Mama. I swear." As the sun climbed higher, life in the village gradually returned to normal, but word of what happened spread quickly. The tale of how Obika ventured into the evil forest at night and survived circulated from one hamlet to the next, growing into a legend told around flickering fires. Children would huddle a little closer to those fires when they heard it, and even the bravest elders felt the hairs on their arms rise, remembering that dreadful night. On quiet nights, when the moon was new and darkness lay thick, some villagers claimed they could hear distant drumbeats or faint laughter coming from Ajo Ofia. Those who heard it would shut their doors tight, stoke their hearts, and utter prayers, remembering the two children who came back from the land of spirits. And so, the story of that night in the evil forest lived on, a chilling reminder to respect the unseen world. No one in Umuaka ever dared break the old taboos again, for they all knew the spirits of the evil forest were real and watching from just beyond the light.